Good morning and good night to those of you watching. Today we are going to break down the steps and the progress of my Demon Slayer piece. This piece is sped up because of the more normal speed would take a lot of hours of time to make and edit the video altogether. So that's why I resorted to make it shorter. Now, maybe next time I will try to do a live stream where I can broadcast my process from start to finish. Let me know if that's the kind of content you guys want to see. And if you want to see short snippets of this piece, you can go on my TikTok or on my Instagram to see the short version of it. And of course YouTube Shorts where I post most of my stuff. Alright, so let's get into it. Now, as an artist struggling with anatomy, I like to use references whenever I get the chance to. So I always make sure to use a digital app for anatomy when I make these poses, especially when they are dynamic fight scenes much like the one I chose to do right now. So when making these poses, especially when they are in dynamic stances just like this one, I like to use this app called Pose It, which I found when browsing through the App Store when I first started digital art. Some of the stuff was locked, but with a small one-time payment I was able to get complete access to its features. The best part is I could download the scenes or screenshot them in the way I needed them when starting the drawing. After applying the references onto a different layer, I began to start what I call the sketching phase. This is a pretty good foundation to start on because it doesn't have to be super detailed yet. A good tip is to put a separate layer for the sketch and label it if you're able to. I like to label it as sketch, of course. Very obvious. So that way you won't forget which one you're working on. I like to use a pencil for the line art to do my work because it's close enough to the feeling I get when I do my art the traditional manner, which is with pencil and paper. And yes, I like to doodle in a traditional sketchbook whenever I get bored of staring at a screen. I already do enough of that in class lectures and all-nighters when making content and studying for homework assignments in college. Actually, this script is one of these projects for my YouTube Shorts content. Anyways, when you're sketching, it doesn't matter if it still looks a little bit messy as you're trying to get the main chunks of it done for time's sake. Now, sometimes I have a habit of drifting off into the wrong layer, and it causes me to make mistakes often. So I resort to using this tool that the app has, which you can lock different layers. So whenever you lock a layer and you accidentally click on it when you're working, it prompts the option to unlock the layer if you want to work on it, or to cancel so that you won't have to ruin anything. So usually I just hit cancel and continue on with what I'm doing. And since I found that out from the app that I was using, I find it easier to focus on the right layer when doing my art. This is the polishing phase that follows soon after the sketching phase. In my own head, the polishing phase has two within it. In order to break it down for you, you have to add two more layers. The first layer that you already have is the sketch layer. Second is polish layer number 1 and polish layer number 2 above it. Here's a brief picture to show what I'm trying to say. Anyways, polish 1 layer consists of a slightly more cleaned up sketch phase. Sure, it has more detail to rely on from the references that you had, but it's different due to it needing to make sure that the lines are more solid and refined. With the second polishing layer, you can often change the thickness of the strokes that can make certain things pop out. I like to do this with my characters when separating them from my background, which I will cover on later in this video. After creating a more solid outline, I want to be able to add the color to the piece. This phase is often the most time-consuming despite the other color palettes previously picked out from the references that I used for my OCs. The second reason I say it's time-consuming is due to the fact that it's a lot of area to cover. This time, however, I decided to add a background with vibrant colors first before coloring my characters. This way, I'm able to get the harder part done with. For this piece, I decided to add a lot of colors and not use too much line art so it doesn't drown it out. This is something I was worried on because if I made my line art any thinner for the background, the pixels would be a lot more noticeable, and this also applies to the line art for the characters. So by minimizing the amount of line art that I use for the background, it helps me minimize the work that I would have had to do for all the line art. I'll have to continue drawing throughout the piece to show you guys what I mean. Anyways, the stuff in the background that I wanted to portray was sort of a messy mushroom ground with a varied species. Thank you to Google for providing these images for reference when I needed them. I also made sure to make a dark background to mimic the night sky. The simplistic yet colorful background art style helps with trying a variety of elements like trees, fungi, and other features in nature. This isn't exactly my strong suit, but I'm still happy that I was able to do something out of my comfort zone. Following the background, I will be able to color my two OCs in peace. Once again, I use references for determining the color palettes of my OCs in this piece. The app that I actually use has a feature to save different color palettes in each OC, which I intend to do soon, so I'm able to find the color palette much easier in the future pieces. This was actually something I learned from doing different pieces when I was in a different anime community for art. I'll let you guys guess in the comments which one you think it was. Anyways, so in this process, I like to use an ink pen brush because it fills a good amount of space. But since its smallest thickness is 2.0, it's a bit of a disadvantage when filling in thinner areas. That's why I switched to some smaller, thinner brushes to fill in the spaces. I'm such a perfectionist that I always attempt to color the inside the lines and always get annoyed when it's not the case. It's funny because even when I have the eraser tool to fix said mistake, I can still find a pet peeve when I don't get it the first time. Does anyone else have some sort of pet peeve when they draw digitally? Let me know what your pet peeves are as an artist, or if you're not an artist, let me know what your pet peeves are anyways. The colors that I want to lay down first for the foundation are known as the flat colors. To me, it means that it's the regular color palette without using any darker or lighter skin tones or any background tones. And this also applies to the lighting or darkness on clothing, skin, and other parts in the piece. This will be something to worry about later on. As you may be able to note, my corpse OC has a sort of pink pastel kind of aesthetic due to the color choices that I made. I actually would like to say that my corpse member OC's cloak is similar to some rabbit earrings that I actually own, which were my favorite from Hot Topic. Like, oh my god, I love their store so much. My Demon Slayer OC, however, has blues and greens because I wanted to be able to tell them apart based on their intentions. Rabbits are also seen as a symbol of luck, and that's if you ever heard of the superstition behind rabbits' feet. And of course, rabbits are also, symbol of fertility because, they reproduce a lot, while also symbolizing creativity and rebirth. Meanwhile, fungi can be a symbol of decay, disease, and repulsiveness. This can show that my Demon Slayer's OCs, the Demon OC, also basically is surrounded by death, in which she also takes the lives of different corpse members, which makes so much sense for these characters. Okay, so no one really asked, but I think some of you might like to say, based on the character design for my Demon OC Agaric, oh, but why are they different mushrooms from the actual ones she used for her Blood Demon art? Well, this will be relevant later on throughout the video. Please keep on listening if you'd like to know. But first, a little bit of context on how I got into the Demon Slayer manga and anime. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the manga series, I'll be reading off the synopsis that I found online. And I apologize if I butcher any names when I'm reading this out loud. Kimetsu no Yaiba is a Japanese fantasy manga series and comic book by Goyoharu Gotoge. It follows Tanjiro Kamado, a young boy living in the Taisho era Japan, who becomes the sole survivor of his family after demons kill them. He then sets out to save his sister Nezuko, who has transformed into a demon. So recently, I finished the manga back in 2022, and I immediately took a liking to it. But some of you may not know that I actually started watching the anime first. This was because at the time when lockdown for the coronavirus was at its peak in 2020, when I was looking for something to keep me occupied while school was moved to virtual learning and much more precautions were needed. With that aside, Demon Slayer anime and manga keeps me interested not only for some wonderful characters and animation, but it kept me sane during the lockdown when stress and uncertainty of the future was at its peak. While working on this piece, I want to be able to introduce my characters. So there's a human character named Momomiya Usagi, and a demon character, Agaric. Now the inspiration for each character is actually quite interesting. Momomiya Usagi's name, first of all, was inspired by two characters from two different popular series. The name Momomiya was inspired by a character called Ichigo Momomiya from the manga in the 2000s called Tokyo Mew Mew, which was actually my first manga series that I read in my middle school library. The second being Usagi, which translates to rabbit in Japanese according to Google Translate. The character that I was thinking of, Usagi, was from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. The one that I'm referring to was the one from the year 2012, which is weird because to me it still feels relatively new despite it being 2023 now. Momomiya's design was particularly inspired by Ichigo's normal form before she turns into a magical girl. But her body type is similar to Toka Hirishima from Tokyo Ghoul, and a similar sword to the swordsman skills of Mikasa Ackerman in Season 1 of Attack on Titan. Now, before anyone asks, no, I've never finished Tokyo Ghoul, and no, I've never finished Attack on Titan due to being busy with school and work. However, I'm pleased to say that the color palette for my OC, which I chose, gave it a softness in my art style, which I like to display. I actually prefer making warmer, soft, and pastelish color palettes because the colors make me happy. Now, I will be telling some of the backstory of this character. Momomiya is the only child whose closest family member is her mother. Momomiya's father, after becoming a demon, ended up devouring her grandmother in front of them and took off into the night. Momomiya and her mother were saved by Mitsuri, the love Hashira. Momomiya, feeling in debt to the Hashira and wanting to search for her father, ended up joining the Demon Slayer Corps. She rose through the ranks quickly as she was able to take up a position as a Sugoku to Mitsuri. Momomiya was able to create her short breathing style known as rabbit breathing. Sounds a little silly, right? Well, to put it simply, her breathing style consists of lots of speed, flexibility, and quick movements similar to a rabbit. I don't have a specific number of forms for this breathing style yet, but I'll be doing another video to cover her breathing style in more detail when I have more time. And hopefully I'll be able to do a more full body piece of hers, and maybe a short comic detailing her backstory as well. But who knows? We'll see what the future holds with that. Moving on to my Demon Slayer character, which is a demon. Her name is Agaric. Is another character that's loosely based off older drawings from a previous OC that I had if they were a demon. Though I ended up tweaking it when I made a whole nother OC. Here's some old sketches of the early concept art. As you may have been able to see, it was quite a difference, yet still have some similarities to these sketches. The color palette that I went with for this character that contrasts my corpse member character is that I wanted to use the cool colors, one like green, blue, and purple. I thought that it would be a nice contrast with the intentions of and personality of this demon. One of these demon characters in Season 1 of Demon Slayer has particularly inspired Agaric's blood demon art abilities. Susamaru is the name of the character in the anime, and they have the ability to throw these balls in order to attack people. Except with my character, Agaric, she's able to grow and manifest mushrooms at will. They are color-coded with some different spots, some having blue, pink, or green spots that she uses, which she is able to make these mushrooms the size of apples to throw, but she can also make them grow bigger too, depending on how much power she has. The ones with the blue spots emit a sort of sleeping powder when thrown or placed in a certain spot. Usually works when she's trying to get away from someone who's far more powerful than her, so that's often a strategic advantage to her. The ones with the green spots emit a poisonous gas when inhaled or eaten. Now don't ask why people would eat that. Anyways, these can also explode and be placed anywhere, much like the rest. And finally, the pink spotted mushrooms can emit flames that are fueled by her demon blood, similar to Nezuko in the anime. The blood is thick and can stain easily on another person's clothes or skin, which can lead to irritations and to be lit on fire. Agaric, in terms of height, is about the size of a 10 or 12-year-old girl because she was turned into a demon by Muzan at a young age. Agaric doesn't remember any of her life before becoming a demon. The only memory that she has of her previous life is her pink kimono that she wore that day. Shortly after climbing the ranks of the lower moons, she solidified a place in the upper moon 6. Though she doesn't show her number because she doesn't feel much importance by it. Her favorite way to consume humans is by sticking them with her blood and to fatten them up with mushroom spores, causing them to explode as she drains the energy from her meals. Her feeding ground is littered with mushrooms that cover the remains of humans. Once people had wandered in. She doesn't like people to come to her feeding ground when she is sorry. Her feeding ground is littered with mushrooms that cover the remains of humans who once wandered in. She doesn't like her feeding ground being invaded. Once feeding off of lost humans who wandered in, then she's able to get her power. Unfortunately, soon as she rose to the ranks, she was slain by another demon slayer, which is why her memory was erased soon after she died, and she was left as one of the forgotten upper moons. Back to our discussion about the drawing. I want to be able to provide some tips and tricks with the app that I use. The app that I use for art is called Sketchbook. Reason number 1. It's free, and it has a bunch of cool features. One of them being that the app is able to record my entire lengthy Speedpaint video while I draw like it's all normal. So usually after finishing my drawing and recording the screen on my app, multitasking at the same time, it automatically gives me a choice to download the file when I click to the stop button on the record. Which is then where I use a different app to edit my Speedpaint. Which is Speedpaint can usually be already up to 3 or 2 hours long, even when it's already sped up and edited to a certain extent. The Sketchbook also has a variety of completely free brushes that I can use to make different textures and details on my digital canvas. For example, one thing I like to do is I like to use the hairbrush feature that sort of smudges the color to form a texture that you would find in straight hair, which I tend to use a lot when adding lighter colors onto my character's hair. And whenever I add shadows to a character's skin or clothes, I prefer to use the regular smudge brush that can be used to blend nicely and give it a more softer tone that looks more believable for skin type. This is one of my most used brushes that I think is important when I am doing my own art style. It's also one of the most notable ones. I'm gonna be real with you guys. I made the mistake of not doing the layout of the boxes first, but that's okay because I can always improvise with this. Either way, when making my mini comics, by being able to read more manga, I'm able to get inspired and take more initiative when it comes to making a manga page. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because slowly, as you make more pages, maybe you'll eventually be able to make a whole manga volume by yourself. So when adding the text boxes, Sketchbook gives you a feature for you to type up your text, and you can also draw or color your text boxes when needed. There is 3 different shapes that you can do on the app. So there's a circle, a square, or a line, basically, so that you can use your imagination for that. Though usually I tend to freehand it, so that gives it more of a variety. But anyways, though the app, I have to be honest, is a bit hard to get used to when adding the text, because you have to add the text first before you do the text box, because it's just easier that way, because you can't do them at the same time like the other apps, so that's the only downside. But other than that, it's something I can get used to. Now, today I decided to add colored text boxes when I was doing the manga panel, because I thought it would bring more emphasis to each emotion related to each text box. The last order of business that I wanted to take care of is a belated introduction before wrapping up this video. My name is Axolotl. I am a Mexican-American woman who speaks both English and Spanish. Spanish was my first language that my parents taught me, and English was my second that I learned along the years of being in school. I am a college student pursuing an English degree because I enjoy reading and writing. To be honest, I'm not really sure what I want to do with that degree or what path it would take me on after graduating with it, but it's something I've always wanted to do. Some of you may not know that I used to write a lot of stories and poetry over the years. This was stuff that I liked to do since I was younger because it kept me quiet and a lot of company. Some of these stories ranged from romance, horror, or other forms of poetry. Some of the other hobbies that I like to do are rollerblading, I like to play video games, I like to go shopping, and I enjoy hiking, because I like to be in nature. These are things I like to do to have fun and pass the time. I want to play a short game of 2 truths and 1 lie. Number 1. I made an entire Donkey Pinata costume for my Halloween costume. Number 2. I am an avid consumer of daily horoscopes. Number 3. I am learning American Sign Language. And here's the final result.